Late August in western Montana. The kind of evening where the light goes gold before it goes dark, and the air smells like pine resin and wood smoke, and someone's uncle is standing over a grill with the quiet pride of a man who has been waiting for this moment for months. 6 people. 1 bear. And a vegetarian who never touched the meat, who still ended up in the CDC's case files. The bear had been shot in Canada, transported across the border, frozen, deliberately, carefully, for 45 days because everyone at that cabin knew the rule about wild game. You freeze it. You kill what's living inside it. The family had done this before. They knew what they were doing. There were 2 families at that cabin that weekend. Children running between the trees. A cooler full of beer going warm in the sun. And on the grill, black bear ribs rubbed with spice, cooking over direct heat. He had 2 servings. His wife, a vegetarian, stayed away from the meat entirely. She loaded her plate with corn, grilled right there on the same grates, same grill, same evening. She was careful. She was responsible. She ate no meat. 3 weeks later, both of them were sick. That detail, the vegetarian getting sick, is the thing that will unravel everything. But before we get there, understand this. Every decision made at that grill was made by people who believed they were being cautious. The 45-day freeze, the hot fire, the celebration that felt like tradition because it was tradition. He did everything he thought you were supposed to do. The question that will follow him into the emergency room, and into the CDC's case files, and into the story, is a quiet one. What happens when the thing you're supposed to do isn't enough? The first symptoms arrived around day 3. Nausea, some cramping, a loose stomach that he attributed, reasonably, to travel food, or the richness of the bear meat, or just the disruption of being away from home. By day 7, it had mostly passed. He went back to work. He felt fine. What he didn't feel, what no one can feel, was what was happening beneath the surface. Trichinella larvae, once ingested, don't stay in the gut. They hatch. They penetrate the intestinal wall. They enter the bloodstream. And then they do something that sounds like science fiction, but is documented biology. They migrate through the body, actively seeking striated muscle tissue, skeletal muscle, diaphragm, and the heart, which is, technically, striated muscle. The migration takes days. The larvae measure less than 0.1 millimeters. They travel silently. By day 14, he had a fever. His shoulders ached deeply in a way that felt different from soreness. His jaw was stiff. He assumed he'd overdone it on the hunting trip, hauled too much gear, slept on a bad mattress, pushed himself. Men at hunting cabins do not typically think parasites when their shoulders hurt. They think they're getting old. The CDC's documented data from the 2022 South Dakota multi-state outbreak, a case structurally similar to this one, recorded a median symptom onset of 11 days post-ingestion. Cardiac involvement appeared in severe cases at 3 to 4 weeks. That delay is the biological trap. The symptoms that feel serious arrive weeks after the meal that caused them. By the time a patient walks into an emergency room, the larvae have already been somewhere they should never be for quite some time. He was not yet in an emergency room. He was taking ibuprofen and going to bed early. The fever would break, he figured. It usually did. It didn't break. It climbed. And here's the thing. What happened next is the reason this case ended up in a published federal report. On the morning of day 21, his wife noticed his face. The skin around his eyes, both eyes, was swollen. Not dramatically, not cartoonishly, but visibly. Periorbital edema, the medical term for swelling around the orbital socket, caused, in this case, by Trichinella larvae migrating through the small muscles of the face and eyelids. It is one of the classic signs of trichinellosis. It is also one of the most under-recognized because it looks like an allergic reaction, or a bad night's sleep, or a sinus infection. Then came the chest pain. The emergency room physician who saw him that evening was thorough. The periorbital swelling was noted. Blood was drawn. And when the results came back, one number stood out. Troponin, the cardiac enzyme that elevates when heart muscle is under stress or damage, came back at 4.2 nanograms per milliliter, more than 4 times the upper limit of normal. An echocardiogram was ordered. The images confirmed myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle itself. Myocarditis has many causes. Viral infection is the most common. Autoimmune conditions. Toxic exposure. The ER team began working through the differential. And then, as part of a thorough intake, someone asked the question that cracked the case open. What have you eaten in the last month that was unusual? Bear meat, 6 weeks ago. Montana. The physician called the CDC. While that call was being made, something else arrived. A second case from the same household. His wife, the vegetarian. She had developed a fever in the past 48 hours. Muscle aches, no gastrointestinal symptoms, which was notable. No nausea, no cramping. The classic early-stage gut symptoms were absent. But the fever and myalgia were real. And when the ER team connected her timeline to his, to the cabin, to the grill, the picture shifted entirely. A myocarditis patient with bear meat exposure, and a symptomatic vegetarian from the same weekend who ate no meat. Same grill, same evening, same bear. This was no longer an individual case. This was an outbreak. If this kind of deep dive is what you come here for, subscribing takes 2 seconds, and it's the best way to make sure you don't miss the next one. Now, back to the investigation. The CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report for 2024 documented what the investigation uncovered. The bear had been hunted in Canada, processed, and portions distributed to family members who had traveled to that Montana cabin from across the country. When investigators began conducting case interviews and ordering serology, blood tests measuring Trichinella antibody titers, the numbers grew. 6 people infected, 3 states, all of them connected to a single animal. The investigation methodology was precise. Detailed dietary histories, timelines mapped against symptom onset, serology panels run on everyone who had attended the cabin weekend. And crucially, investigators requested the remaining bear meat from the family's freezer, the portions that hadn't been cooked yet, still sealed and frozen. The laboratory results answered the central question of the entire outbreak. The bear meat tested positive for Trichinella nativa, and the larvae were viable, alive, after 45 days of freezing. This is the scientific core of what happened, and it requires a moment to sit with. Trichinella nativa is not the same organism as Trichinella spiralis, the species historically associated with undercooked pork. T. nativa is the bear-adapted species, found in Arctic and subarctic wildlife, in animals that evolved in environments where temperatures drop to conditions that would kill most parasites. Over thousands of years, T. nativa developed freeze resistance as a biological trait. It is not a defect in the freezing process. It is not a failure of the family's preparation. It is an organism that evolved specifically to survive exactly what the family did to it. The USDA freezing protocols that reliably kill Trichinella spiralis in pork, 5 degrees Fahrenheit, held for 20 days for cuts under 6 inches thick, were developed for a different species. They do not apply to T. nativa. The CDC and USDA are explicit on this point. Freezing is not a reliable kill step for bear meat. It never was. The family followed advice that was accurate for the wrong organism. What does kill T. nativa, what kills every species of Trichinella, is heat, sustained internal temperature, the kind that only a meat thermometer can confirm. Now comes the detail that made this outbreak something more than a cautionary tale about bear meat. 2 of the 6 infected individuals had eaten no bear meat at all. They were the vegetarians at the table, and among them, his wife. The corn, grilled on the same grates as the bear ribs. Here's what happened at a physical level. Bear fat rendered during cooking. Juices dripped onto the grill grates. Larvae in those juices didn't instantly die. The grill surface temperature was uneven, running hotter at the edges than at the center, the same uneven heat distribution that left the interior of the bear ribs undercooked. In the cooler zones of the grate surface, larvae in the rendered fat survived long enough to contaminate the grill surface. The corn was placed directly on those grates minutes later. The vegetarians' cases were milder, lower larval load, no cardiac involvement, no periorbital edema. But their serology came back positive. Trichinella antibodies confirmed. The CDC used these two cases to formally document grill cross-contamination as a transmission route in this outbreak. It was the first time this specific mechanism had been confirmed in a published outbreak report. The broader context matters here. Between 2016 and 2022, the CDC documented 7 separate bear-associated trichinellosis outbreaks in the United States, involving 63 cases across 17 states. Bear meat now accounts for a disproportionate share of U.S. trichinellosis cases, because commercial pork, regulated under USDA inspection, has effectively eliminated Trichinella from the domestic pork supply. The risk has not disappeared. It has migrated. It lives now in wild game, in animals outside the inspection system, in the freezers of hunting families who are doing everything they were taught to do. What's your experience with wild game preparation? Did you grow up with rules about freezing meat? Or did your family have a different approach? Drop it in the comments. It matters more than it might seem. And if you haven't already hit the like button, it genuinely helps this research reach the people who need it. Treatment for trichinellosis is albendazole, an antiparasitic medication combined with corticosteroids to suppress the inflammatory cascade that was attacking his heart. He was admitted. Cardiac monitoring. Restricted activity, because an inflamed heart muscle under physical exertion can trigger arrhythmia, and arrhythmia in the context of active myocarditis can be fatal. The recovery arc was slow. Albendazole kills the adult worms and circulating larvae, but the larvae that had already reached muscle tissue and begun to insist to wall themselves inside calcified capsules within the muscle fibers, those cannot be fully eliminated. The body's immune response surrounds them. Calcium deposits build around the cysts over weeks and months. They become inert, harmless, permanent. He will carry calcified Trichinella cysts in his muscle tissue for the rest of his life. They will not make him sick. They will not spread. They are simply there. The biological record of one evening in Montana, sealed inside him like amber. All 6 patients across 3 states recovered. No fatalities. The CDC's case report, however, included a pointed note. Cardiac involvement in trichinellosis is survivable with prompt, accurate treatment. The danger is misdiagnosis. A patient presenting with myocarditis and no identified dietary history gets treated for viral myocarditis, a different protocol, potentially a worse outcome. The bear connection, in this case, was identified because someone asked the right question at the right moment. Not every physician asks about bear meat. The rule is not complicated. It is not a new rule. The CDC and USDA have stated it clearly for years. 165 degrees Fahrenheit, internal temperature, measured at the thickest part of the meat, with a calibrated meat thermometer. Not cook it until the juices run clear. Not grill it on high heat until it looks done. Not freeze it for 45 days. Internal temperature, verified, every time. This applies to all bear meat, all wild boar, cougar, any wild carnivore or omnivore that might carry Trichinella. The freeze-resistant species, T. nativa, T. britovi in European wildlife, exist outside the assumptions built into standard wild game preparation advice. And the grill cross-contamination lesson is equally simple. Either use separate cooking surfaces for wild game and other foods, or clean and re-season grill grates between cooking the meat and anything else that goes on afterward. The corn did not have to be part of the story. 1 thermometer, 1 rule. This outbreak was preventable at the grill, at the moment the bear ribs came off the heat. If you hunt, or you know people who do, share this, not as a warning against the tradition, as the one piece of information the tradition was missing. And if you want to keep going deeper on exactly how foodborne illness moves through communities in ways no one expects, the next video is already queued up. Go Go back to the cabin. Go back to the gold light and the wood smoke and the uncle at the grill. He had driven that bear across a border. He had frozen it carefully for 45 days. He had built a fire hot enough to char the outside of the ribs. He was proud, and he had reason to be proud, and the people gathered around that table loved him and trusted him and filled their plates. The 45-day freeze was responsible. The hot grill was careful. The shared meal was love. None of it was negligence. Not one decision made that evening came from carelessness. It came from a tradition that was built over generations of hunting and preparing wild game, a tradition that was right about almost everything, and had simply never encountered this specific organism with this specific adaptation in this specific host. Or perhaps it had encountered it before, in quieter ways, in fevers attributed to other things, in muscle aches that passed and were forgotten. Traditions don't record their near misses. His wife loaded her plate with corn and stood at the edge of the firelight and did everything right. She is the proof that in this story, right was defined by incomplete information, and that incomplete information, in the right circumstances, is enough. The outbreak ended. The family healed. And the following hunting season, when the uncle's truck pulled up to that same cabin in western Montana, there was something new in the kitchen kit, sitting next to the cast iron and the bottle opener. A meat thermometer, small, inexpensive, the kind of thing that looks like it couldn't possibly matter. It matters.